Hey, what's going on? I'm back with Tim Berzins from Amplify Metabolism. Trent McCloskey for any new viewers here from Train Eat Live. And today we want to dive into CO2 production in the body and why it is pretty much the basis for a healthy, robust metabolism. What's going on, Tim? How you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm doing
Awesome.
well.
Awesome.
Had a pretty good night's sleep. Feel ready to talk about this. I've actually wanted to talk about this topic for like 2 or 3 weeks now. Because I remember I was reading an article and all of a sudden, like, it's kind of like it comes to you in a rush. Like you kind of
Mhm.
see it where we kind of talked about this a little bit, that the difference between like thinking through something versus like letting it go. And then all of a sudden you just see the entire picture. You know what I
It
mean?
comes to you. It's like that thing of like if you hear I don't know, say like a song on the radio and you're just like, oh, what's the name of that song? And you try so freaking hard, but whenever you stop trying, like 10 minutes later, the name of the song would just hit you. It just
Yeah,
comes.
exactly.
Yeah. And CO2 has been, it really changed the game for me in this understanding of like doing things in your lifestyle that promote its production. Cause like in the very, very first understanding, whatever we got into it, I always feel like, okay, you bring in breathing oxygen and then you breathe out CO2 and that was it. But actually it goes much, much deeper in actually supporting metabolism. And that's why I'm really excited on my end to talk about this as well.
Yeah, and so that's basically the where I was going with that was like it all of a sudden it came to me in this very like vivid picture of like how it's working between your cells and
Mhm.
the bloodstream and then out to the
Yeah.
lungs and like how it's all connected with thyroid. And so I've wanted to talk about it for a while because I think it's really an interesting topic. It's one of the foundational aspects of understanding like the bioenergetic view and metabolism
Hmm.
because specifically because like the basis of all this, we talk about hormones a lot, we talk about like lifestyle factors and all this stuff,
Hmm.
but like all of that is really connected to a base structure, a base foundation of like the way your body is producing energy.
Hmm.
And that means that we had said before, I think we were talking about calories in, calories out, and
Right.
I use the example that if someone were burning all of their carbs with the glycolytic metabolism producing lactic acid,
Hmm.
that they would absolutely have worse health than someone burning all of their carbs with the respiratory metabolism using oxygen producing CO2. And
Yes.
so not only from like the difference in like the ATP production, which is actually the actual energy production, but like also in the fact of like what byproducts are you creating? Like what
Hmm.
metabolic byproducts are you creating? If you're
Yes.
creating CO2 versus lactic acid, those are going to have different effects in your body.
Yes.
And so it helps you to see that like the way you produce energy really does matter.
Hmm. Exactly, because those byproducts, your body uses that as a signal to determine, like, okay, we're in a good metabolic state cells, like you can ramp up your energy, make new cells accordingly, how it should be. Or as if the byproducts are, more inefficient, then it kind of signals to your body you're in that stress state. And I think the
Yeah.
first thing that was really like the biggest game changer for me was like just understanding. I think we actually mentioned this in another episode, talking about like the Bohr effect or the Haldane effect, whichever one it
Mhm.
is. Should have kind of spot or checked that a little bit of what it was, but basically,
It's
it's
sort of both. I did actually check it
yeah,
to clarify. It is actually it's kind of both.
yeah,
I think the Bohr effect says that carbon dioxide rich blood
hmm,
will push out oxygen from the cells, and then
hmm,
the Haldane basically says that oxygenated blood will push out carbon dioxide. So basically, all it's saying is that those two not compete, but in order to exchange carbon dioxide, you must have oxygen come in, or in order to have oxygen come in, you must exchange it with carbon dioxide.
hmm.
That
Exactly.
basic idea.
Yeah. So it's like if you want to have oxygen to where your body needs it most, it only makes sense that like if your body is producing more CO2 as a byproduct in a healthy state, that's going to improve your health overall because you're actually able to get oxygen everywhere throughout your body essentially. And I was like, oh
Hmm.
my God, that was like the first light bulb for me that was like, oh, this makes so much more sense. And actually diving deeper that why it's the foundation and actually why we do the lifestyle things we do, why we eat the foods we eat. Because again, if we keep our body producing CO2 as a byproduct, all your health improves, your metabolic rate improves, and all that good stuff.
And I think it's really interesting too to make sure you understand that like the CO2 being a metabolic byproduct, it's a signal to all the other cells
Hmm.
that this cell is producing, that cells are producing energy through the respiratory metabolism. So it's a
Hmm.
signaler molecule in that sense, but it also has its own effects as well that trigger more respiratory metabolism. So it's not just a byproduct, and it's not just a signal. It's both a byproduct and a signal. And I think the really interesting part, like when you start to piece this together, that really gives you a higher level view of the human body, is that you have 70 to 120 trillion cells in your body. And each of these cells has a boundary around it, has its own unique set of things that it's doing, its own unique set of structure. Whether it's a liver cell, whether it's a skin cell, whether it's a kidney cell, or any of these different differentiated cells in your body, they're all their own unique little entity. Now, what allows that entity to exist within one single structure that we call the human body? Because you could just take 70 to 120 trillion cells just hanging out in the world. Like that. What makes them coherent? What makes them one unified organism? And that's communication.
Yes.
Really think about it. They communicate to each other in that way. And so it's almost like the whole fluid human body that exists of cells has like a certain energy that flows through it that all the cells respond to and are communicating to each other that, hey, we're going to do this now. Hey, we're going to do this now. Hey, we're going to do this now.
Exactly. And gosh, that's such a good point. And it gets me even more excited because we're planning on doing an episode talking about like body awareness and everything. I feel like you just said how all these cells communicating as one to make up us as a human body on a whole. I think people kind of stop, or they're not aware, or they don't think about, I mean, you and I are thinking about this more on a daily basis, but most people aren't thinking about their individual cells, right? But we're thinking that we're just like this one person. But if you come to that understanding, it kind of helps, especially for me, if I understand like, okay, this is why I need to do certain things because I'll have this effect, it allows me to do those things more easily because I know how it's improving my health. Does that make sense? Because it's almost like, you're connected to the outcome. You're connected to like the energy of why you're doing it.
Like I've said this before. Literally, if you go into, this could be a huge conversation if we really wanted to go into like higher and lower self. So, but I'll keep it really brief, is that if you want to work out and get in shape, you go to the gym. The gym's uncomfortable. Well, when you're in the uncomfortable gym, your lower self says, I don't want to do this. Let's go home. I don't want to, because it's in the moment. It's just like wants what it wants. It's not really connected to anything larger than itself. The higher self says, no, this will be good. Go through this period of, discomfort so that we can reach our goal. So the question is, you could be approaching your workout with complaining and drudgery and not wanting to be there, or you could connect to the higher purpose of why you're working out. And even though there is discomfort and pain in the moment, it's not suffering. The switch between pain and suffering is when you slip into the lower self who says, this is happening to me and I don't want it. When pain and discomfort can be not suffering if you stay into that connection with the higher purpose. So in the same way that you're saying, if you had to, so we were talking about our morning routines, like when you wake up and warm your body up and everything, why you're doing that. You're connected to the purpose of warming the body up and giving the body some love and coming back into your body after a night's sleep. And that's so much easier to stick to that routine because you're connected with the purpose of why you're doing it.
Yes, exactly. I also kind of like to call that, again, not to get away from the thing of CO2, maybe this will be a whole nother episode, but again, all these ideas pop up. But what you kind of related is how I view it as like, I like to call it like patterns of existence, where it's like your current self right now and who you want to become, your future self. Usually those two are going to be at war with each other, right? And it kind of creates like these patterns of highs and lows, how I like to look at it. So it's like, if you can catch the lows or catch that old mentality, you can kind of catch yourself and course correct to get to where you want to go, in a sense.
Yeah. Which is ultimately the point of discipline.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, I think you're right. I think we need to save this for another episode.
pull it back to the CO2. Yeah.
We can go down some rabbit holes that'd be really, really awesome. But yeah, so CO2, major byproduct of the respiratory metabolism, which signals communication to other cells. Hey, we're doing respiratory metabolism. Well, what does that mean? Well, respiratory metabolism is your efficient metabolism that happens when your body is not under a state of stress. It means that your body is in an abundant state. It means that your parasympathetic nervous system is turned on, and that you are relaxed and you can grow, you can repair, you can heal. All of the things that are lacking in modern society today because we're so switched on all the time in the sympathetic nervous system.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the main thing to note there is a lot of people end up staying stuck or the majority of their time in the sympathetic nervous system, that stress state,
Mhm.
to where it's like, that isn't a bad thing, right? But it's more so, it's like, if you're in that, how do you turn it off and actually rest, recover, and make that parasympathetic, that respiratory metabolism your baseline state, and essentially.
Yeah, exactly. So there's, there's a lot of different things around CO2. Like obviously, so just to start, I guess we can go into like the three different types of metabolism, or really it's the two different types of metabolism.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
probably a great point to start, just to make
um,
sure that, it's all
yeah,
foundation.
exactly. So we already talked about like the glycolytic metabolism,
Mm-hmm.
which is like the fast, cheap, inefficient breakdown of carbohydrates for fuel.
Mm-hmm.
This is why your muscles burn when you work out.
Mm-hmm.
Is because your body is basically saying we need energy quick, we need it right now. So we're
Mm-hmm.
not going to really like worry about having long-term efficient energy production. Like do it now. Like let's burn it now so we can get over the stress. So you get that lactic acid burn coming out.
Mm-hmm.
The better way is respiration, which takes the carbohydrate, the glucose molecule, all the way through the Krebs cycle on the electron transport chain.
Mm-hmm.
Far more energy is produced, far better metabolic byproducts are produced, and that's the CO2. That's when we're in that good state.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the breakdown of fat, which is a process called beta oxidation, it's much slower than both glycolytic and respiration of carbohydrates.
Mm-hmm.
It produces a lot more ATP because there's a lot more carbons in a fat molecule, but it skips the first step that the carbohydrates go through, and therefore it misses one of the carbon dioxide molecules that would be produced. So overall, each molecule of glucose that goes through respiration
Mm-hmm.
produces 3 CO2. And if it misses that first step, meaning that it's fat being broken down, then it produces 2 carbon dioxide. So the respiration of fat, which is beta oxidation, will produce carbon dioxide, but it won't produce as much carbon dioxide as the breakdown of carbohydrates will.
Mm-hmm.
And so when your carbon dioxide is really high, basically the only way you can get there is by saying we are producing so much carbon dioxide because we're breaking down, carbohydrates through respiration. So we should continue breaking down more carbohydrates. We're in a good state. Food is plentiful. When you switch into breaking down the fat instead, now you're at a place where you're producing less carbon dioxide in comparison to the oxygen that you're consuming, which is what we call the respiratory quotient. And so therefore you're in a situation where you're pushing metabolism down because you're producing less CO2 and you're not showing the other cells. You're not communicating to all of your other cells that you're in an abundant state.
Exactly. And that was the point I was going to touch on there, because if your body's not producing as much CO2, again, it's coming back to like that being a signal to not essentially raise metabolic rate, but rather to lower it, because it's not using an efficient energy system to produce, essentially. So with that said, I was going to bring up the ketogenic diet and why it isn't that necessarily the best, because it's working in that way of metabolism. Would you agree there? Or like, how would you like, because I want to talk to you about this actually. It's like, why would you say the ketogenic diet isn't the most efficient? Because it's all the hype nowadays.
Yeah, it is. And I think it requires much more time to really dive into it.
Yeah, definitely.
But what I will say is that when you're eating lots of fat, you're burning lots of fat. And basically the only time that in nature that we would be doing that you'd be having lots and lots of fat, is a time that's kind of more scarce.
Right.
If you really think about it, like if you're in a lush environment, you'd be eating berries and fruits and maybe the occasional animal. When things get scarce, all the animals go into survival. Now you start eating more animals, so you're getting lots more fat and protein. So, it's not that stress, that kind of stressful state can't be good or lead to short-term benefits and changes like fat loss and stuff like that. But again, we go back to the same thing we always talk about. Are you keeping it switched on? Are you living your life out in the desert, hunting other animals forever? Or are you allowing, yourself to like be in the lush garden, eating lots and lots of, good carbohydrates with the occasional animal as the craving for it, as your body is telling you, hey, we need some more protein or we need some more fat. So like that's kind of like from a higher level perspective, from like the chemistry side of things. Ketones are fuel. They're a decent fuel for your brain to use,
Mhm.
but the way I view it is much more of like a backup. It's much more of a backup fuel during
Yes.
times of famine for your brain to use,
Mhm.
rather than viewing it as like the superior fuel for your brain. You know what I mean?
Yes, and I would agree there too. It's almost like you thinking of it as like the backup system is a perfect way and helps me even like, okay, this is why we're actually doing this because it's more optimal and it's going to signal to your body to raise your metabolic rate and improve health because you're using the
Mhm.
most primary efficient form of energy production essentially.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
curious. Have you ever tried the ketogenic diet, or have you ever tried like super low carb?
No, no, I couldn't. Just from like all of, I did it from a spot of just like knowing how good forms of carbs make me feel. You know what I mean? I
Right.
just never wanted to. I definitely experimented with going a little bit higher fat, but at the same time, though, I was still there with an optimal amount of carbs from good,
Hmm.
fruits and veggies is there. But at the same time, though, it's like that's just coming back to me improving my fats and like getting more butter and more coconut oil in. I definitely get probably anywhere from like 80 to 100 grams of fat in a day.
Yeah.
Again, that's going to vary from everybody, but no, I haven't went full blown ketogenic diet because I think the media kind of skews it a little bit in a way of like,
Oh.
screws it too. But it's like, it's something that could be considered keto is like bacon, butter in your coffee, and like, I don't know, just like more fat on the plate. Whereas like you could literally have something considered keto that has like, I guess a little bit of like greens, a little bit of fruits in there. But again, it's still more of a fat heavy meal, right? It's like where
Yeah.
is like the cutoff point to where that you're actually like supporting your health as well. And I just found that like you need a beneficial source of, good fruits and vegetables to feel your best. You know what I mean? So no, I never went like full blown keto.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you've also always been pretty lean. Like you're
Yeah.
ectomorph
Yeah.
naturally. So it's,
Hmm.
I feel like people who come from that side of the spectrum
Hmm.
probably would never feel the urge to try ketogenic diets, since it's more geared towards like fat loss.
Right.
I had tried something like it for about a month. I had a coach for a while. This was actually when I went through that we had talked about before, the where I was like playing drums, lifting, surfing
Oh
all
yeah.
summer, like doing
Yeah.
sprints and running on like zero
Hmm.
carbs, 0 calories. Um, and at the time it did get me lean. I think this is the most dangerous thing about the ketogenic diet. We don't have to go too much further down this
Right.
road, because like I said, it could be an episode on its own.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
but when I was on that, I definitely lost fat, and that's part of the pool for people, is that it's like you can lose fat on it. But the question is not like, can you get lean? The question is, can you stay lean?
Can you maintain
And
it?
you
Yes.
hit that point. I got to tell you, like, I'm a person with relatively strong willpower. Like I can be like, I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna
Hmm.
focus on what I want and do it.
Yeah.
There is something that overrides you when you get into that really, really low place of
Hmm.
where your body is basically telling you like, no, you will do what I say. Like,
Yeah,
it's hard to
yeah,
describe it.
100%. Yeah, that's almost like I think even before that is whenever people have a lot of binge eating episodes. I was going to make a little note there. This is definitely another episode, which I'm so pumped about. But I think
It's
you
like
and I both
creating a
have,
catalog.
I know it's a whole catalog, but
Yeah.
you and I have both went through successful fitness transformations. Again, that could be, we could dive into those in different things, but it's like, because I think we're so good at switching our habits, our environment, and also our mindset that come with it. I feel like a lot of people lack switching those and they try to hop on, let's do keto and actually see if I can lose some weight. I hear Sally lost 15 pounds in the first month,
Mhm.
but then all of a sudden gain it all back, right? I think that discipline, it's easier for us because we know if like we can dive in and actually fix the main things that make up our whole day in the weeks and the months or whatever, it's easier to stick to something. But in the same
Mhm.
sense, you will hit a point where your body just like, no, no matter
Yeah,
like how
exactly.
much we're in the routine or whatever, it's like you can hit that point and just like your body's going to take over and actually do what it needs to do to survive.
Well, so it's interesting that you're saying that on the heels of this conversation we just had about discipline,
Hmm.
because that's what people think discipline
Hmm.
is that it's force yourself to do it and just suck it up and discipline, 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 discipline.
Yeah.
It's a lesson in masochism, basically.
Hmm.
And that's not what discipline is. Discipline should come along with respect. If you
Hmm.
respect your body and the power of your body, and the fact that you as a mental entity only have a certain, immediate control over the animal. Yeah, if you've
Hmm.
heard the elephant and the rider.
Yeah.
Have you
Oh
heard
yeah.
that
Yeah.
analogy?
Yep. Yeah. We talked
So the
about this
big,
before years ago in Florida. I remember it. Yeah.
exactly, yeah,
Yeah.
and you can use this. I kind of like to change it to make it cooler in my head to be like the dragon and the rider.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. That's definitely cooler.
this big dragon, and you're like
Game
the
of
little
Thrones.
rider on it.
Yeah.
Game of Thrones, exactly.
You're a little fan. Yeah. It's good.
Which is like the dragon is this. It'll listen to you, but
Hmm.
it has a mind of its own, and if you piss it off, it's not going to do what you want. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah.
So are you, and this goes to what you said about like waging the wars of the higher and lower selves.
Hmm.
Are you fighting the dragon, or are you working with the dragon to get what you want?
Exactly. Because
The
if you work with
conditioned
it, you.
habitual self,
Mhm.
the conditioned habitual self that's going on these programs and this autopilot, are you trying to fight that? Are you trying to fight the body to get it to do what you want it to do?
Mhm.
Or are you working with it and respecting it
Mhm.
and therefore guiding it towards what you want so that both of you are in harmony, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I love it. I think that's like literally the switch of discipline that's either going to have you fighting or working more with everything to get what you want. But there still is that discipline there. But I loved how you turn that into like more of having respect for yourself and more of like working together. Because that's the secret, I believe, to not only getting results but maintaining them for life at 100%.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just like
Absolutely.
period.
I was just
100%.
listening to an Alan Watts that basically was talking about the I forget exactly how he worded it, but it was something along the lines of like the unaware or the unawakened man will row his boat with all the effort in the world to get where he wants to go. The awakened man or the wise man puts up a sail and lets nature do it for him.
Mm. Ah, that's good.
Yeah,
That's really good. Yeah. So
yeah. And
I
so,
think yeah. Or I was going to say, it just tying it back into kind of the ketogenic, because I want to spin this back around to like improving CO2.
yeah,
Just more so, it just really comes down to the sustainability test. If someone's listening to this, like trying to lose that excess body fat or thinking about doing keto, if you tried keto, it's really just having the marker of like, can you actually sustain this for the months and years to come? Because if you can't, or you can't see yourself doing it, because of who knows, like living your life socially, professionally, whatever, relationship wise, whatever it may be, you got to work more with that and actually come at it with the respect. Like you said, I love that flipping discipline around to then actually work on something that actually feels right and feels good for you. And then you can sustain it for the long term and actually get the results and keep them forever.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And I'll also this is a good tie back into it because I know we're supposed to be talking about carbon
Yeah.
dioxide, but I do think that these little side branches are important. I think it's
Mhm.
maybe it's like a little bonus that people weren't expecting when they listen to this, but I think it's
Yeah.
really important information. But to tie it back into carbon dioxide, you're going to be producing more carbon dioxide when your thyroid is high, and basically as a system, as an overall system, when you are in the relaxed parasympathetic and what I will really like to call the abundant state, which is
Mhm.
to say you're in that garden, times are good, your caveman fridge, it's full, you got tons of food, you're not worried about a thing. It's when
Yeah.
your caveman fridge is empty that things are like, oh shit, what's going on? Like, got to
Yeah.
worry about them.
Yeah.
And
100%.
and so when you really think about that, uh, what we're just talking about, well,
Mhm.
in a time of scarcity, when you're trying to hunt these animals because that's the only food that's left, that's like the war mindset.
Mhm.
So are you at war with yourself, trying to force yourself to do these things? Because what you're doing from a deep psychological level is creating the war mentality, the war state of consciousness throughout your entire body,
Mhm.
which is a stress state.
Mhm.
If you're in harmony with your body and you respect your body and you're working towards something, you are from a deep psychological level, from the baseline. All your actions are sitting on top of this baseline foundation, this
Right.
baseline foundation of harmony, of things are good. Again,
Mhm.
my caveman fridge is full. I got tons of fruits and berries and herbs, and I can go get animals if I want. These animals
Yeah.
have been eaten, so it's not like this lean meat that I'm trying to like gristle out of every little
Yeah.
drop. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's
Yes.
good. It's good. Times are good.
Yes, exactly. And yeah, I think people create this war state throughout the whole entire day, 24/7. And I believe that's the problem. And not only that, this is also kind of tied into putting that nutritional stress on your body from poor food choices, which is also probably going to lower your metabolism on the whole, less CO2 production, especially like bad foods that are bogging down your thyroid and things of that nature. But just before we dive into that, more so, it's like going to war. I've always told myself kind of like the gym is kind of like wartime. I haven't like fully said like, oh, you're going to war and go to the gym, but it's more so I always like kind of view the gym of like doing a little bit better, 1 more rep, 5 more pounds, whatever that may be. But at the same time, if you're in that whole entire day, you got to have the balance, you know? So it's like, I always view that if that's going to be the time to put that kind of stress on your body, what are you doing the other, let's just say 23, 22 hours that are going to help your body recover that and keep it in that good, healthy state, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Kind of how I view that. Yeah,
it does. Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so like I think the mindset is really, really, really an important part of it, but it's obviously not the only part of it. There's also the physical, chemical, nutritional components to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we're trying to raise CO2, everything that we talk about on this channel and on this podcast, where we're talking about, raising your metabolism, raising your thyroid, eating good saturated fats, making sure you're eating plenty of carbs, whether they come from healthy sugars or healthy starches, keeping your minerals high, especially sodium. All of these things that help relax your body, put it in a better state from a nutritional perspective so that it can burn energy in a more efficient way. All of these things, super great, super good for increasing metabolism. But when we're talking about CO2, now remember I said that CO2 is both a byproduct and a signaler on itself. And really what that means, it's a communication agent. Communication means coming from both sides. Like I talk to you, you talk to me, I talk to you, you talk to me. So the production of it is telling other cells, hey, we're producing at a high rate, you should too. And then the signal itself is having an effect on them, irregardless of whether it's coming out. So what I'm trying to get here is exogenously raising carbon dioxide. So things like bag breathing, things like buteyko breathing, things like baking soda and stuff like that, as an exogenous form of increasing carbon dioxide. What do you think about that? Have you tried those things and have you noticed benefits, or like what's your take on that?
I know we experimented with bag breathing a little bit. I haven't done that recently, but one thing I'm always conscious of is nose breathing. Because this is kind of, I wanted to almost save this for body awareness, and we'll definitely touch on this again, but people that like show like that short and shallow breath through the mouth, it's like that. It's like you're literally letting out way more CO2 from your body, and your nose does a better job of actually maintaining high level CO2s in the body. This is coming from Oxygen Advantage. I think you read through that book as well, right?
I'm not sure. I don't think so.
Basically, he just goes really in depth, and he talks about maintaining high levels of CO2 in the body, but that you should only be breathing in and out of your mouth, or I'm sorry, in and out of your nose. And breathing out of your mouth releases more CO2, which in turn will lower your overall levels of that. It's almost like what contributes to people having like panic attacks. They're only like that shallow breath out of your mouth. You're letting out more CO2, which then in turn you can't get as much oxygen to your brain. If you can't do that, you're going to have that anxiety kind of panic attack state. So something that I love doing that kind of helps train me to do that is, one, it's a little hard whenever I work out, because whenever you really get out of breath, it's hard to like only breathe through your nose, but it's something I've been like working on, like training myself to do. But I also tape my mouth shut whenever I sleep every single night. So I'm only breathing through my nose.
I remember you were doing that. You had like a bunch of these little strips. They make actual strips. Yeah.
And that's something that I can notice a slight difference, whether I wake up in the morning, say I didn't tape my mouth, and my throat is dry and sore. It's like, oh, I must have been breathing through my mouth all night. And I also feel a little bit not as rested. But whenever I tape my mouth shut and I'm only breathing through my nose, I feel I get the best sleep and also wake up feeling more rested and feeling better. In that more calm, we described this on an earlier episode, where you wake up, your hands and feet are warm, you're relaxed, you're like, oh, I feel so good. And then you get out of bed out of like pure excitement, not like because like you're stressed. So yeah, I definitely noticed that difference, but that's like one of the main things that I've been working on lately to increase that.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. And it actually pairs really well with something I've been reading in a yogi book about like health in general and about hatha yoga. And he says that the main cause of all illnesses, like one of the most major causes of all illnesses, is improper breathing. A lot of it being mouth breathing. And then even beyond that, shallow clavicle breathing. So if you just your upper lungs, but if you breathe all the way down to the base of your spine, you like focus on that point, your perineum at the very bottom of your body, and you breathe through into there.
That full breath. This is good for body awareness.
This is good for body awareness. We'll come back to this for sure.
It's important for sure.
But doing that deep breath, and here's the thing is, like, there was a while that like I had kind of read this stuff and I was like overwhelmed. That's what I was overwhelmed. I was like, how am I supposed to do this all the time and remember to do this? So what I would say for anyone listening to this is like, don't even worry about trying to implement it right now. just do it. Just breathe in all the way to your spine and feel your entire front of your body open up. Because like that's a really interesting experience to have, to realize how much more you could be breathing than you actually are breathing.
Right.
And then as you breathe in, you can actually, like if you're slouched like this, you can breathe in and then you sit up, and now all of a sudden you can breathe in even more. So
it feels
I
good.
think it feels great.
So then you keep doing it. Yeah, exactly. I love that, because it's like, it might sound overwhelming. Like, oh, Trent just said to tape my mouth shut while I sleep. Tim's telling me to breathe all the way down to my perineum. What's all this stuff doing? Like, what is this? But it's like, no, it's like if you start doing this stuff, not even thinking about putting into your schedule or something weird like that, just doing it and it feels good, you'll keep wanting to do that. And because your breath is literally connected to all this. And that's why it's related to body awareness, and everything is connected, obviously. But maintaining those higher levels of CO2 is like, I think it was in that book, Oxygen Advantage, that he talked about, like if a cat is sick or if an animal is sick, it would breathe out of its mouth as opposed to them primarily breathing out their nose. So it's like there are some things there we can pick from. It's like if you're just, hunched over breathing through your mouth, you're going to already create so many more problems for yourself, because your breath controls so much of the body and how it regulates itself, even all the way down to hormonal level.
That's really interesting, because I almost think to myself, because animals are way more intuitive than we are, that I wonder if, okay, so breathing through your mouth can cause a disease state if you're healthy, but if you're in a disease state, does breathing through your mouth have some sort of advantage? Or is it literally just because you're stuffed up? I don't know. I'm just kind of thinking about that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah.
I have to think on that one a little bit.
Maybe like some kind of virus or infection is preventing them from breathing with that. But yeah, that's a good idea.
And well, okay, well, I'll have to think about it. I don't want to say
it's something to think about.
Yeah. So one of the things that I thought was kind of interesting is that like raising, okay, so I think Ray Peat talks about the naked mole rat a lot, which is an animal that will burrow under the ground, basically in like it basically creates like a CO2 chamber, because it's just breathing in the CO2, and its oxygen levels get really low, and a bunch of like good things happen for the metabolism. And kind of using that as like a moniker for bag breathing or for buteyko breathing or for any sort of like CO2 raising technique. And it's pretty interesting to me, because I think that having high CO2 can help to maybe like kickstart. We had talked before, and I think maybe in like every episode we've talked about this, how there's like a spiral in metabolism where this is affecting this, which is affecting this, which is affecting this. And so if you can kick something higher, then it helps to like raise things back up. And so if you're doing it with that mindset of like a short-term little kick up for your metabolism, then it might have a benefit, but it's not really doing it's not really having the effect that CO2 really is beneficial for. And that is the balance of minerals inside and outside of the cell, which means having a strong cell boundary. So when CO2 is produced through the metabolism, it's coming from inside the cell out into the blood, and then from the blood out into the air. When you're bag breathing or doing some sort of CO2 thing, you're breathing in a higher concentration of CO2, meaning that the CO2 you lose comes right back in, and you're getting less oxygen. Now, that's not the same state as producing it from within your cells.
Right. Okay. Yeah, you make sense now. Instead of like doing it, continue.
So the reason I think this is important is because the molecule on itself might have some protective benefits, but you are creating a much different physiological state through bag breathing than you would if you just had naturally high thyroid and naturally high production. Because in that state, you would have high CO2, but you would also have high oxygen, because the exchange between the lungs and the air would be really, really high. That's what the Bohr and Haldane effects are about. Whereas in this state, you have high CO2, but low oxygen. And you also, and I think this is the most crucial point, you also don't have the flow of CO2 coming from inside the cell to outside the cell. And I think that is so crucial, because when carbon dioxide is produced in the cell, it combines with water and creates carbonic acid. And that carbonic acid will bind to calcium and sodium inside the cell and take them outside of the cell. And now you're creating the proper mineral balance, because inside the cell, you're supposed to have magnesium and potassium, or higher levels of magnesium and potassium. Outside of the cell is where sodium and calcium are supposed to be. So what happens in the stress state is that we get flipped. We get these flipped where now the inside of the cell becomes alkaline and the outside becomes acidic. The inside now has sodium and calcium, and the outside has potassium and magnesium. So this is happening because you're not producing enough of the carbonic acid to bind it and flow it out so that what's out here can come back in. And so understanding that, and I'm starting to tie some of this stuff together with the ideas of cells being batteries and your entire body being one big battery, that if the environment is alkaline and when it's supposed to be acidic, then the battery's not working the right way. And so like that flow of CO2 is important for keeping the battery in a place where it can actually have the flow of electrons and the voltage that it's supposed to have to do the physical work that is supposed to be doing from having that electrical charge.
Yes. I thought that what I wanted to add to that is also I feel people, whenever they're in that stress state, this is related to the first episode we did in the morning routine, where if you're in that stress state in the morning and say you're just dumping your body with diet soda or even coffee without the right amount of calories to help metabolize that caffeine, you're triggering that stress response and your body's going to start dumping your electrolytes, which is going to mess up the balance of the cell as well, which is directly related to what you were saying, that it's like, it's not helping your body produce CO2 as a byproduct the best way naturally. So it's like fixing those things first will help bring up the system as a whole.
Definitely. Yeah. And so, I mean, just that understanding alone about CO2 and how it's flowing out of the cell kind of gives you a different picture. Like that was like a kind of intense spiel because it just kind of like opens up so many doors of like some really cool other connected ideas. And again, it starts to give you this understanding that you can't just do, so if CO2 is, you can't just say CO2 is good for you, so bag breathe and so do that, like it doesn't work like that. There's so many other things that are connected to it that will boggle your mind and not make sense unless you look at it from a unified perspective where you're looking at the big picture as a whole, and then the collage starts to make sense. These little symbols that don't mean anything, like this doesn't really mean anything. If I zoom out, you're like, oh, these are my hands. You can you see it from farther away and the picture makes sense. But if you're too close, you can't really understand.
Yeah. Which is, I think, really important of having like both perspective, the zoomed in approach, and then also the zooming out of it to see everything as a whole. But then like, okay, if something's not working right, you can kind of zoom in, but then you always got to take that step back to view the thing as a whole.
I would say you can zoom in as far as you want, as long as you don't lose connection with the zoomed out perspective, because then you're keeping everything within its essence. You know what I mean?
100%.
And if you lose yourself into the detail, which happens so much in research and science, like professors, they can't admit they're wrong because they're just so far into this little rabbit hole of research that they can't zoom out and see you're looking in the wrong place. You know what I mean? You're not even looking in the right place. You have to zoom out, make sure you're connected to the big picture, and then go in as far as you want. Look at the details as far as you want, but don't lose awareness of what it's all about to begin with.
Yes, 100%. And not even just like in research and science, which it all kind of stems from, but even somebody that gets so caught up, I know this is for me, into weightlifting, so deep into weightlifting that you forget about mobility, maybe even yoga or doing other things like rock climbing and stretching, or like even from just a perspective of nutrition, like, think it's only about calories in versus calories out, but actually not zooming out to be like, whoa, wait a minute, I'm eating too many Pop-Tarts here or something like that. It's like, you know what I mean? It's like, you got to actually look at these things that like zoom out to see the big picture of it. It's not just about calories in versus calories out or getting stuck. I guess what I'm trying to say, getting stuck in a certain dogma or a certain way of doing things. It's good to have both sides of the equation there.
It's balance. It's all about balance.
It's all about balance.
Yeah. So, okay, I think we're probably at the point we want to hit it. I think I said all the points that I really wanted to talk about with carbon dioxide. I'm sure more is going to come to me. I noticed after every time we film an episode, like the next night and the next day, I'm like thinking about it, and like I get like 10 new insights for each one. So more will come from this. Yeah, same here. And I think this is also an episode that it's another really good foundation episode that is going to little ideas from the CO2 episode is going to come up in later episodes because we're all building from this. But it all starts with making sure your body is producing high levels of CO2. That's going to be a signal there to raise the metabolic rate on a whole in your body. Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Cool. Well, do you have any other any pieces that you want to throw in or any other ideas that came up?
No, I think that's it, man. I'm good.
Yeah.
But again, like you
Thanks.
said, they're going to probably pop up after the episode that we'll sprinkle in future episodes.
Yeah, exactly. And
Awesome.
if you guys get benefit out of back breathing and stuff, like definitely do
Mhm.
it. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do it or that it doesn't have benefit. I just want to keep it within the appropriate perspective.
Right.
That it's not the same thing as producing high CO2. You're getting a different effect from that.
Right. It's almost like I look at that as a way, it's almost like a supplement, right? A supplement is going to necessarily fix everything unless your diet is also, a good foundation there as well. And then the
Mm-hmm.
supplement can actually do and offer you that little bit of benefit, but it's all coming at your foundation. It's like, are you
Yeah.
actually doing the things we talk about here in your lifestyle, getting good sunlight, getting in good fats, good healthy carbs, sleeping properly, improving your health on a whole in every area?
Mm-hmm.
That's going to help you get back into that state.
Definitely.
But I love, yeah, I guess to wrap up again, I love how you said, like, you could use these things to kind of kick things up a little bit to help your body get in that state and maybe fix some issues. But then again, you always have to make sure that you're fixing your foundation as well.
Mm-hmm. The way I kind of view it is, it's like the involution evolution model,
Mm-hmm.
where if you can imagine, like I kind of want to do this so it looks right on the screen. You start here and you like quickly go down, and then on the other side you like steep climb up, and then it's like, so it kind of goes like this. Does that make sense?
It
And
does.
so it's like when you're healthy, you can stay up at this level and you're fine.
Mm-hmm.
You can stress, you can move up, stress, move up. But if you stretch yourself too far, you slip down. And now you have to like climb back out, like this. If you do something a little healthy, but then you stretch yourself out, boom, right back down, boom, right back down. You have to really climb out. And then from here, now you can kind of like chill a little bit. If you stretch yourself out, it's not a big deal.
Yes, 100%. 100%. It's almost like I kind of view it in another sense of not even related to CO2, but it is related, right? But it's almost like, how much are you borrowing from like tomorrow? Say if you're staying up super late hours, you're going to really impact the next day. Or it could be more days than just one because you have to catch up on your sleep or something of the sort, right? So it's always like bring yourself up to that newer state of health, that baseline, and then knowing how you're operating, which is almost the perfect segue into body awareness in the next episode. But it's like knowing where you're operating so you can maintain that and bring yourself up to a new level. Whereas like if you go way too far, you slip down. And then if you stay there too long, that's whenever a lot of long-term side effects will pop up.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. All right, cool. I think we're going to cut it there. If you guys like this video, please give us the thumbs up. Share it with anyone who is interested in carbon dioxide and that kind of the bioenergetic and metabolism approach, or anyone who needs to hear some of the deeper, more profound things that came through us in this episode. Please comment if you have any questions and any other topic ideas or anything that we always appreciate your support. So seriously, guys, you're all awesome. Anything else you want to say, Trent?
That's all. I'll see you guys in the next episode.
All right. Peace, guys.
Awesome. See ya.